Hello, Rensep members. I am here with one of the fantastic members of the scientific committee, and that is Dr. Matt Melvin-Koushki. I'm very pleased to have you here so that you can illustrate your your role at Rensep, your research and everything. So, hi, Matt. How are you today?
Not too bad. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, long time listener, big fan. But yeah, this is exciting.
Yeah, it is definitely for us as well. So, the first question that I'd like to ask you is, would you please introduce yourself and your role at Rensep?
Absolutely. I'm a associate professor of Islamic history at the University of South Carolina, where we can talk about this later. We've just launched a new MA in Magic and Occult Science that I think will be of interest to Rensep members as well and their students. I specialize in early modern history of science, technology, philosophy in the really modern Persianate world, post-Mongol, all the big empires. So as science and philosophy and technology interact or intersect with empire building, um, the the scope, my historical scope is the 14th to 19th centuries, covering about a third of the human race under these big early modern Persian empires, where you have a massive fluorescence of the occult sciences as simply standard imperial science. We're talking sociologically about Silicon Valley. This is where all the money is. These are the strongest, most ecumenical, or most cosmopolitan, wealthiest empires. So I like to think it's very elitist, but I like to think of my research as being on the Silicon Valley of early modernity, in the sense that there's a lot of weird practices going on. It's all very mathematizing. So a big part of my research is the mathesis narrative, right? The mathematization of the cosmos, especially using the occult sciences and the renaissance of Pythagoreanism, especially in Persian, something that has been completely excised from historiography. So Persian Pythagoreanism, mathesis, the mathematization of astronomy, but also astrology, and all the other occult sciences like geomancy, Kabbalah, and these ways of rereading and rewriting the cosmos as a mathematical text, which is, of course, often associated with the birth of early modernity, the scientific revolution. So I'm interrogating and deconstructing the category of scientific revolution with the Persianate occult sciences. That's kind of my thing. I have a number of other approaches, but I think we need to decolonize history of science in particular, not just for understanding the past or what the West is, but also just for our own survival, right? Clearly, we're not in a sustainable situation. So where do we go wrong? I think we have to go back to understanding the trajectory of Western science in general, and Islam is an extremely crucial part of retelling that story. Again, 2/3 of the human race is either Muslim or living in Islamic State in the early modern era. The occult sciences are everywhere, and Plato and Pythagoras are mentioned more in Arabic and Persian than in Greek and Latin. So obviously it's integral to whatever we think of as the West, and the rise of Western modernity. So yeah, that's kind of my approach. I use magic a lot, so I use a lot of polemical equations like Islam as the West, Islam as magic, Islamic magic as science, Islamic magic as enlightenment. I get into that debate as well. But more generally, I'm focused on the weird studies, and Jeff Kripal's category of the superhumanities. Right. So yeah, big fan of that approach, not only as the salvation of the humanities, but as possibly crucial for surviving becoming upheavals.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's an ethical commitment just as much as a scholarly commitment for me, and which is why I place a lot of emphasis on practitioner approaches as well. I definitely am a practitioner of various occult sciences myself, and students really get into that. It's the best way to communicate the importance of historical, but also current importance of our related fields. Yeah.
Is it something that you also talk about with your students?
Yeah. One of my favorite occult sciences is geomancy. Not the sort of Chinese version of feng shui, but the Arabo-African Islamic version that becomes very popular. It's like the Arabic cognitive I Ching. Binary system. Leibniz is inspired by it to invent computing, modern computing. It's a binary 0-1 even odd system. So I really like to do that because no one's ever heard of it, but so no one has a bias against it, like astrology or magic or things like this. So I have my students do geomancy in my classes, and everyone loves it. They adore it. I use it myself daily. So we can talk more about that. But yeah, I find it very useful because it's something that Francis Bacon, right, is extremely enthusiastic about, as well as proof for his new scientific method, right? So again, not from a history of religion standpoint, but more history of science standpoint, I find it very useful to deconstruct this idea of Islam as somehow only religion, as eternally medieval. Other to the West, geomancy is an Islamic African science that blows up in popularity everywhere and helps create what we call modernity, especially computing. So again, the Silicon Valley theme there. So yeah, geomancy is my fave.
And what is your role at Rensep?
I'm the Islamicist. I'm bringing that perspective. I'm an early modernist, so just to keep everyone apprised of the current research. Again, I'm extremely excited about Dean Radin's new sigil magic experiment, which I've talked to him about, and I think would be the devices he's constructed for that would work perfectly for geomancy as well. So yeah, that's something I would like to pursue further with him and the whole team. But yeah, I'm just here to supply data on and perspective on 2/3 of the human race in early modernity.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And for those of you who haven't seen there's also an interview to Dean Radin, both as a member of the scientific committee and also on the specific research project that Matt is talking about. So you can check it out on the platform. And then what is your research about? You mentioned something about it, but could you expand a bit more on your research and how does it intersect with the study of esoteric practices? It's pretty obvious from what you said already, but let's just expand a bit more on your research, because I'm sure that people will want to know more about what it is that you research more specifically.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry. Yeah, definitely. Again, I work exclusively on the occult sciences, and this is a specific category in Arabic and Persian, the two dominant languages, again, used as a scholarly languages from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So that's enough work for me, right? So I focus exclusively on various occult sciences in the Arabic and Persian manuscript tradition. We have millions of texts and artifacts that have simply never been touched. They have been written out of the historiography, out of Western intellectual and social and political history, simply because they are Islamic. It's a Renaissance fiction that Islam, and especially the Ottoman Empire, is somehow the eternal other. So obviously this is a fiction. It is simply not true. If we want to understand, again, Westernness as the Hellenic Abrahamic dialectic, which there's other ways to define it, but in terms of intellectual history, the construction of Western knowledge, knowing, is very obviously Hellenic. So yeah, I focus on the Hellenic tradition in Arabic and Persian, especially Pythagoras and Plato. Platonism, Pythagoreanism are dominant, absolutely dominant in the Islamic world in a way they simply never become in the Latin Christian far west, as I call it. So Islam as the Midwest, if you will, and Latin Christendom as the far west, but much more isolated. So, and also much more Aristotelian, especially with theology, but also physics. So one of the specific things I've shown is that you have, again, the rise of Pythagoreanism in Arabic and Persian well before you have the same in Latin. And it leads to the revolution of astronomy and astrology as a mathematical science that has no further need of Aristotelian physics. This is seen as a revolution. This is the beginning of the scientific revolution, but it happens in Iran first, 100 years before it happens farther to the west. So this is one of my major findings for history of science. But the context, right, is very occult. It's Pythagorean, but it's also letrist, which is a Kabbalist. I can talk more about that. So the two main occult sciences I work on, among others, are letrism, basically Islamic Kabbalah, and geomancy. Both are the primary vehicles of Pythagoreanism in the early modern Persianate world. Again, this mathesis, the mathematization of the cosmos. And they're seen as providing empirical proof for the validity of Platonic Pythagorean philosophy, right? Cosmology. So that's one thing. I mean, those are the two sciences I focus on, but they're also completely married to astrology. So talismanry as a marriage of letrism or Kabbalah with astrology. So talismanry becomes such a big thing in the early modern Islamic world that you have kingship being reconceived as a talismanic office, right? The king's body as talisman. So it's not only history of science, it's history of empire. And you can't understand these early modern, extremely successful ideologies without understanding the basics of the history of talismanry in general. Again, much more sophisticated in the Persian world than in the Latinate. It's there, it's certainly coming through Arabic into Latin, but the Latin scholars have no interest, bizarrely, in anything that happens in the Islamic world after the 12th century. Zero. Byzantine scholars, by contrast, are quite interested in translating Persian geometric treatises, for example. But yeah, they have no interest, so you get this extreme disproportionality in our historiography, where this massive body of data, millions of manuscripts, millions, it's a huge bonanza, are simply left to rot or actively being destroyed through current state ideologies, as in India. Islamic manuscripts are being destroyed, libraries are being destroyed as we speak. So again, the ethical component is very important too. But yeah, so other occult sciences, physiognomy, astrology, as I said, are obviously important for the imperial project as well, to the extent that simply every court is awash in occultists, professional occultists. I don't work so much on the popular, if you will, versions or forms of the occult sciences. Simply put, I work on courtly cultures because that's the easiest to track. Again, hundreds of thousands of manuscripts I have on my hard drive as we speak. I can spend lifetimes working on them. It's harder to extrapolate down the chain, but what I do find a major shift in the 16th century, especially something I'm calling occult democracy, which is extremely anachronistic, I know, but it's the unprecedented shift and concurrent with the printing revolution in the Latin sphere. But this has been going on for much longer in the Islamic world. There's far more books, but for the first time ever, you have the production, a mass production of books. Again, there's a paper revolution happened centuries before in the Islamic world, so books are everywhere. But for the first time, you have a culture of, again, occult democracy where books replace the need for a teacher, right? Completely. So you have do-it-yourself geomancy, do-it-yourself astrology, what have you, texts proliferating from the 16th century onwards, and effectively empowering the individual against the state, using the same technologies that the state is using. So, geomancy as Googling in this sense, radar, light detecting, all these other state applications, but effectively, again, fulfilling the same technological and socio-political niche as Googling does now. You can, as an individual citizen, can try to empower yourself against the state with Google, or wiretapping, or what have you, social media as well. The state weaponizes it against its enemies as well as its own citizens, but the citizens are also empowered. So I've been looking more into the less elite manuals, grimoires of various occult sciences, to see if I can argue more fully for this occult democratic turn in the 16th century, where states and people, individuals, are using these technologies both in collaboration, but also in antagonism. It's a major part of the history of warfare as well. You cannot understand any early modern warfare without the occult sciences, period. It is state building in ideological terms, but it is also basic to the practice of warfare. Many of the occultists I work on are also famed as inventors of new forms of gun and cannon technology, right? So there's no real divide, as in our current understanding, between astrology and gun technology. A better astrology, better observatories, better guns. These are all part of the same imperial cultural framework. So it sounds strange to say this, but gun technology as an occult science is very much a thing in my sources, and through the colonial period, such that the telegraph. Muslim scholars in India recognize the telegraph as an occult technology because there's epistemological continuity there, right? So it's extremely useful for understanding the ruptures of colonialism, but also the continuities of colonialism. So we can tell a different, a much better story, not of the superstitious natives squatting in the mud, waiting for the European to come and civilize them by force, but rather the more or less seamless adoption and adaptation of Western European technologies under the occult rubric. So it has a lot of different ways you can take it, and I kind of go in too many different directions, I know. But yeah, the core of my research is on these occult sciences as windows onto major social and political transformations that characterize the birth of modernity in the post-Mongol era.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And
no, I'm not sure if that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You were saying?
No. I was kind of all over the place. But that's kind of my research. I'm kind of going all over the place and seeing how to deconstruct our larger narrative of the rise of the West, the teleology. It has to be destroyed. I mean, it's absolutely false. I mean, it's you can't bear it out at all with the archive. It's a story that keeps on causing mass human suffering and non-human suffering today, right? So it's imperative that we stop destroying our sources and rather maybe read them and maybe practice them too.
So my next question is, could you tell us something about the current state of academic research on historic practices within your field of expertise?
Right. Yeah. So there's a reason why I have all these sort of weird polemical, fun, I like to think, fun polemical equations. Islam is magic. Islam is this. I'm effectively responding to the last 200 years of scholarship in my field. I'm trained as an Orientalist at Yale, hardcore philologist, entirely German training, and it's the foundation, right, for all else. So yeah, I'm a philologist to the death. At the same time, Islam is slotted entirely into 4 or 5 categories professionally. Like, you cannot get a job except in these 4 or 5 categories. Islam is religion, it's scripture, it is law, it is mysticism, Sufism, it is well, yeah, those are the main ones, right? Those are the main 4. You can do history of science as long as it's not too Islamic, and as certainly as long as it's not occult. The occult sciences in particular have been almost entirely erased, again, until very recently, and I mean very recently, only in the last 10, 20 years, almost entirely erased from the historiography, the narrative, right? So you have Islam is over here, and then the rational Hellenic sciences are over here, that Muslims do, contribute to in some way before handing off the torch of true Western civilization to the Latin far West. It's all nonsense. I mean, it's just counterfactual, and it's a violent narrative. It's a destructive, violent narrative that continues to cause suffering today. So, right, where do I come? These narratives come from my experience with peer reviewing in particular. I get a lot of extremely hostile, anonymous so-called peer reviews, especially from historians of science, who simply say, my evidence, which is massive, shouldn't exist, therefore it does not exist. And I have no right to present the evidence. Even when I have presented it, the argument is made that it shouldn't, and therefore it doesn't exist. So this is kind of what it motivates my sort of Molotov cocktail throwing approach. Islam is magic is exactly what missionary polemic is saying all the time, right? So I'm ex-Protestant, so I'm very sensitive to that type of polemic as well. But the shape of my field, Islamic studies, I got my PhD in religious studies, but I identify as a historian of science. For this reason, Islam, it can only be religion, whereas somehow Europe, it's not. Why do we call it Europe rather than Christendom? Because we need to disassociate it from religion, right? It's proto-modern, it's at least proto-scientific. Islam can never be proto-scientific. It is simply a holding cell for true Westernness, and that's it. So historians of science go farther than that in order to, their hearts are in the right place. They engage in apologetics to make Islam seem more rational. It needs to be less occult, even though the sources don't bear out this at all. My own estimations, given the state of the archives, is about half of the mathematical and natural sciences, real science, the Hellenic sciences, are formally occult. Astrology, alchemy, geomancy, lettrism, and so on and so forth. That's half of the entire Islamic scientific tradition. Again, Hellenic tradition, and 10% of the total surviving archive, which has been badly damaged and devastated by the colonial and nationalist processes. So that's all to say. My polemics are focused on this idea that Islam can never be anything but a non-Western religion, and it can certainly never contribute to modernity. Muslims can only be modern insofar as they give up Islam in a way, or have it, or syncretize Islam with colonial disenchantment. Again, this is simply not true. Disenchantment is not a thing, as Jason Josephson Storm has shown. It's a promissory note. We should be disenchanted, yet we are not. Modernity should be the opposite of enchantment, yet it is not. So, again, my folks are very happy with modern enchantment, both in the pre-colonial period and to the present. So yeah, enlightenment is another big sticking point. Basically, wherever I run into these roadblocks with peer review, and I run into many, those are the, I think, fruitful, strategic openings that I think we need to hammer away at to make it possible much more proportionate decolonial historiography, where Muslims can be rational actors. They can be Western rational scientific actors, equal with anyone. Right. So I think I have a few more polemics up my sleeve, but yeah, generally speaking, Islam is magic. It's anti sort of missionary. Islam is animism. This is another thing, right? So the Library of Congress is explicitly organized according to the idea of Islam as animism, as informed by early 20th century Christian missionaries, Protestants. So this obsession with Islam as not only superstition, but animism. So in History of Science today, in the ISIS bibliographies, Islamic occultism is formally on the par with African and Native American animism. I kid you not, right? It is formally on that par. It has nothing to do with Westernness. It has nothing to do with science. It is simply African and Native American, effectively superstition. So animism is another term I like to use and pursue as a weapon for decolonizing history of science, especially now that we are in a new Mongol age and magic is we are in another golden age of magic. Animism is booming, right? Critical animism. So all of these terms we can use. Magic is another polemical term we can use, which is why Emily Sealev and I launched a joint University of South Carolina, Exeter, MA in Magic and Occult Science, using the term magic precisely because it's so polemicized. So we need to go where the term, the uncomfortable terms. I like occult, esoteric. It doesn't really matter to me, but what makes people uncomfortable, I find to be the most productive sites of interrogation. And magic is also something that my students simply intuitively understand, right? They know, yeah, it's not Harry Potter, sure, but they understand I'm not worried about secrecy. I'm not worried about this or that. I'm worried about how, the history of technology, right? How humans understand and control the world. And somehow the general populace, the general public understands magic to be something like that. Yeah, maybe not esotericism or occultism, but certainly magic does fulfill that role. Sorry, excuse me. I get a little heated through my Protestant background, but yeah. But in terms of the current trends in the field, like I said, when I started started publishing, my publishing career about what year is this? 2023, right? Yeah, about
2023, yes.
Yeah, something like that. Who knows? Time is a human construct. Yeah, my field did not exist, right? I like to say, Islamic occultism, whatever terms you want to use, it doesn't really matter. I prefer occultism for reasons that I won't get into, but yeah, Islamic occult studies does not exist, or Islamic esoteric studies does not exist, or Islamic weird studies, as I actually prefer to call it now, does not exist. So it's just really, really just remarkable. So, like a total sea change has happened in my field in only the last decade. We have volumes out, we have conferences, we have organizations, which I'm honored to have played some part in building. But yeah, my main task, as I see it, going forward, is simply to make sure we don't become a ghetto of something Islamic over there, right? We are contributing to Western intellectual, social, political history, history of science and technology, history of modernity, obviously colonial modernity or otherwise. We are equal partners at this table. And, I'm just so amazed and delighted at the success of my colleagues in all sorts of fields. Folks are getting jobs, and yeah, we are here to stay.
Thank you. And another question that I have for you is, why is Rensep's approach important to this field?
Yeah. Again, one of the best means of decolonizing the historiography, which in my field, right, Islamic history of science, in particular, is predicated on purely positivistic, materialist, reductionist approach. The presumption is always that anyone who thinks magic is real is an idiot, is a superstitious native squatting in the mud. And it is that offensive. It is so offensive in, again, sort of my field. Europeanist historiography, no. I mean, this is a problem that has been dealt with, wonderfully over recent decades, such that we can now openly talk about Newton as an alchemist. This is still extremely difficult for any Muslim, right, doing occult sciences. It's still seen as mutually exclusive. Again, in more senior. The previous generation, but I still get blocked from publishing certain things. The most common response, as I said, is this material is not relevant to anything and it should not exist. Right. So one of the best means of decolonizing this incredibly colonial, positivist, anti-scientific, frankly, mentality is simply to reproduce these practices. Do they work or not? My historical actors make truth claims, empirical truth claims, in exactly the same way. And I mean exactly as a Francis Bacon. They are saying, here's these manuals of the sciences. They are reproducible. And here's, they have lab diaries, lab logs, where they talk about experiments blowing up in their face and tinkering with things and creating new technologies or extending current technologies. But they're extremely emphatic that this is all quite empirical as mathematical or natural science and technology. So again, if we can reproduce some of these things in the lab, again, huge fan of Dean Radin and the Ions approach. His Real Magic is the first book I assign in my classes because the students just love it. I mean, it's just, look, we can do this in the lab. Once you've shown that the humans, these are rational actors, Muslim or non-Muslim, it doesn't matter. A lot of these other problems fall away, hopefully. I mean, obviously people get married to certain narratives for, white West supremacist reasons, all very colonialist. But yeah, in my teaching experience, I found that simply having students do some of this stuff themselves and just, empirically record the results immediately makes the point. So I don't have to explain all the things that I've just been saying. I don't really have to explain. Students, not historians necessarily, but students intuitively understand that we're talking about humans, rational human beings, who happen to be really enthusiastic about the occult sciences as means of interrogating and harnessing reality, right? Traumatically, right? So I've talked to many physicists, mathematicians working today, and they have no problem with describing what they do as weird or occult. This is what you do in science, is to pursue the weird cracks in reality, the anomalies, the paranormal. So parapsychology is my favorite tool in teaching. It's harder to use in my scholarship simply because there's such a generational bias. But in teaching is incredibly effective. So I couldn't be more delighted at Rensep's approach to this topic. I very strongly believe in this approach as the only way forward for decolonizing science and technology studies.
You also mentioned about the fact that you are in favor of the scholar-practitioner.
Right, yeah. So again, the scholar-practitioner approach in our new MA in USC and also at Exeter. We just announced that recently. We have an incoming cohort of 9 students, half of whom, are practitioners. But the scholar-practitioner approach is really important, for all these pedagogical reasons. But yeah, it's not just about the scholarship or the academic pursuit, right? Academia is in dire trouble, the humanities, especially, hence Jeff Kripal's the superhumanities approach, which I see as being very much scholar practitioner. We are allowed to have experiences as scholars, and that does not make our scholarship subjective somehow. In that sense, it can be subjective, right? I'm a big fan of the magic and psychedelics approach as well. Islam is I just came back from Exeter at a meeting of the magic and psychedelics crowd, also helmed by Emily Seelove there. And this is the way forward, right? Islam gets you high, right? I mean, as I tell my students, it's like the humanities get you high, right? You can get as easily high in Arabic and Persian as in any other major scholarly language historically. So we encourage experience, everything from psychedelics to tarot, tarot to shamanic drumming. Our incoming cohorts just this fall. Out of the blue, does everything from shamanic drumming to tarot to Kabbalah to witchcraft, early modern European witchcraft, classic stuff. So we have classic, strengths in classic stuff. We have strengths in the Islamic world, obviously, but South Asia, Indian Ocean, early modern Europe, the African diaspora, the American South, Latin America. So we're completely open to any scholar practitioner approaches from any of the strengths in our department. And Exeter, again, has an amazing roster of faculty, as does Rice, Jeff Kripal and Claire Finger and all those fabulous people there. So we're seeing it as kind of a continuum in Amsterdam, in progress, from Amsterdam to Exeter to USC to Rice, for the project of the superhumanities with a scholar practitioner open door policy.
Thank you. And we have one last question, and that is, what do you hope to achieve with Rensep, and what's your vision for the future of Rensep?
I cannot wait to collaborate with Dean Radin in particular on geomancy. That will be amazing. It's like my dream come true. That stuff like this, right? I have always wanted to ally with parapsychologists in particular, and psychedelics folks as well. But I like, because my sources are very, very science and technology, and they're making empirical, truth claims that they say are testable in laboratory artificial settings. They should be fairly easy to reproduce in the lab, not just the alchemical experiments, but also geomancy or other types of very, very practical, easily testable sciences. So I would personally like to see this type of experiments with sigil magic in the lab going forward. That's my I think that's where I can contribute the most as well. But yeah, more generally, I see Rensep as making it valid and professionally productive rather than dangerous for parapsychologists and historians to work together.
Mm.
It is still in my field, it's still quite historically, it's quite professionally dangerous. So this is something that really has to change, and Rensep is leading that charge.
Thank you so much, Matt. It was a very fascinating interview. Anything else that you want to say to the Rensep members before we wrap up?
Right. No, I think that's it. Just and anyone else listening, we do have, if you would like your students to move in this direction, we do have these 2 new MAs in magic that absolutely embrace Rensep's mission and the mission of the superhumanities and the weird as weapons of decoloniality and tools for surviving the new Mongol age.
Thank you again, Matt. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And until next time, stay esoteric.
Thank you so much.